and welcome to the Six Pillar Podcast, hosted by Chief Neil Gang and proudly produced by Techna Innovations. I'm Shalyn Finstad, CXO at Techna Innovations, and for today's episode, I'm honored to introduce you to our very special guest, retired Sergeant John Kelly, a national keynote presenter and law enforcement life coach. John Kelly has faced several attempts on his life from suspects over his 30-year career in law enforcement, but none of these attempts came as close to killing him as he did to killing himself. John's book, Surviving Self-Inflicted Wounds, A Deputy's Life of Redemption, chronicles his life journey confronting addiction, PTS, and suicidal ideation. His Sometimes Heroes Need Help tactical intervention and recovery program addresses the personal, professional, financial, physical, and mental health of the first responder. John gives the audience permission to forgive themselves and, more importantly, the courage and strength to keep getting up, striving to be better today than yesterday. John Kelly, welcome to the Sixth Pillar Podcast. Chief Gang, the mic is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Shalyn, for that great bio of our guest today. You know, I always get super excited about these episodes, but this one's really special to me. This is a brother. We met several years ago. He actually invited me to be on his podcast. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And I don't even know if John even knows, but that was in October. So we're almost talking 2 years now.
No, it's hard to believe that much time has gone by.
Yeah, it does. So I want to welcome everybody to the Six Pillar Podcast. I want to thank the team at Techna Innovations, our technical director and producer, Matt Krill, and our chief experience officer, Shalyn Finstad. I just have to share something about them and the amazing work that they do. They provide integrated media solutions, mobile app development, podcasting, branding, social media support. They have websites, they have book publishing. So if you need any of those type of resources or any of those type of things that you're looking to do in your personal life, then reach out to them. I'll let our listeners know who they are and what they're doing. And it's an amazing work. I always attribute it to the work that I'm doing is only because of the work that they're doing behind the scenes for me. As people know that this has been a 3-year challenge for me to get this podcast kicked off, and the two of them make this happen. So welcome to the Six Pillar Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about leadership, organizational wellness, absent of buzzwords and bullshit. And I know that our guest today has no problems with that platform. And then people always ask me, where's the Six Pillar Podcast? Where'd that name come from? Well, 21st Century Policing model was back in several years ago, and they put it in 6 different pillars. The sixth pillar was officer wellness and resiliency. And that's why I thought it was a fitting name for a podcast that we have on here. As John knows, and most people know, I'm a man of faith, and I always start all podcasts off with a Bible verse that's applicable to what we're going to be going through and what we're seeing today. This is coming out of the book of Luke 14:11, and this is really fitting for our guest today. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. I think that you're going to find out by the time we're done with this next hour, you're going to see how somebody was humbled and how now they're being exalted and spreading a message that we all need to hear in our profession. So, without further ado, I want to welcome my good friend, John Kelly. What a great honor for us to have you here, John.
Neil, thank you. A pleasure, man. There are times, right? Just jump right into it, man. There are people that you run across, and when you do run across them, you go, oh, it could be another 10 years. If I don't see that person, I'm blessed. If I don't run into them again, I'm good. And then there are people like you, no bullshit, where I want our paths to cross more often. Like, how can we be in the same space more often, doing the same kind of things? I have a funny feeling, man, just the way things work out, that prayer, that goal is going to work its way through, especially when you make that move and are on the same coast, right?
Yeah, I can't wait. So before we kick into all this, I have to give a big shout out to Hagerstown, Maryland. Their fire department and their police department just realized that there was a void when it came to organizational wellness and leadership. And I was just out there 2 weeks ago, and I spoke to them about the Asher model, and just great people, passionate people. Spoke a little bit about you and trying to push what you're doing and your message, because I do think there's so many people out there that are doing great things, but there's so much work that needs to be done. So much work that needs to be, so many leaders that need to hear a message about leadership. And we're not here to point you out and to identify who you are. We're here to provide a resource for you because we don't have all the answers. And that's why when we come together, it's so synergistic when John and I sit down and speak. The two of us were just at a gala a couple of months ago. We just sat there and the time just went away. I'm sure the people at the table weren't happy because we just kept jibber jabbering and back and forth. And I think your wife was a little pissed off at me, John. But hey, you know what? I'll make it up to her.
She couldn't get over the jacket and the shoes and how they matched. You left quite an impression, my friend.
Well, it's like the Yankees, right? If you have a void in your performance, you have to distract them somehow. So the paisley blue jacket and the blue shoes is the way to do that, right?
I tell you, it was a home run, man. It was a home run.
All right. So, you know what? I know people may or may not know that John has his own podcast. He's doing great things. It's sometimes heroes need help. It was about 2 years ago that I met John and we sat down and discussed some things. One of the amazing things about that is that we had a pre-conversation, a pre-phone call about what we were going to do. And at the end, we said we should have just recorded. We should have just recorded our conversation because
no doubt,
it was amazing. And we had an opportunity to spend some time. But we're going to turn the table here a little bit on John and take away the podcast host hat and turn him into a podcast guest, because I think that's where John's impact is really at. I know that people may know that John had a very successful career down in Broward County, Florida. And if you don't know, back in the day, that's where the cops all started back in 1989. Right. Life was different. The world was different back then. What we didn't even know at the time is that John started his career in 1991, I believe. Well, that's when I arrived after starting my career in New Jersey down in Pembroke Pines, same year, 1991. So, John, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your story. Tell about this mission that you're on. And again, super blessed to have you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the funniest thing is in the moment you think you know, right? And you're confident that it's not until the end that I started to finally figure some things out. Blessed career down there in Broward County, 30 years with the sheriff's office, 7 sheriffs, a multitude of blessed assignments, road patrol, FTO, detective bureau, sergeant, patrol apprehension, canine handler, training division, motor sergeant. It was just a blessed career. Even all those blessings, Neil, I really managed to fail horribly at life. And getting through all these hurdles, right? I like to say alcoholic, addict, and adulterer. I'll stop with the A's, right? We start going on to the B's, C's, and D's, man. This is going to run long. I realized that with all the training that I have received, all the areas of expertise and subject matter expert in this and that, none of it mattered, because the things that I needed training on was life. Look, that's where I failed. That's where we fail universally as human beings, because we're just expected, man, to know. It doesn't work that way.
No, we'll sit in academies. We're 20-something years old. We go to an academy. We think we got this down pat. We think we know what we're doing. And we're not taught life skills. We're taught how to deal with people. And even so, I'll even challenge whether or not we're even challenged effectively how to deal with people, because we don't teach us how to listen in the academy, right? But you talked about like the 3 A's. I call them the 3 A's of policing, right? Alcoholism, adultery, addiction. Cops don't find new ways of getting in trouble. It's 2024. We're still having the same challenges that we did when we started back in the 90s. So you and I talked about something offline one time, and we said that there's so many people out there running around and they're sharing their story. We said that we agreed that everybody has a story, right? You've been in this profession 5-10 years, you have a story, but does everybody have a message? And that's why having you on today, John, was an intentional act to bring you on so you could share a message, because there's a listener out there that needs to hear what you're talking about. So let's get into that a little bit. You know, I know that you are very open about something that a lot of us were challenged with back in the 90s, you know, with steroids, you know, just that whole life that we all lived, you know, in the 80s and 90s when bodybuilding was so prevalent and we had to keep in shape. A lot of people were abusing steroids. And for our listeners that may be a little bit younger, you know, back in the late 80s, it wasn't classified the way it is now either. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And I'm not excusing it, but I'm saying that there was a little bit of a difference of what steroids were viewed at when we first started our careers. But talk a little bit about that, John, and how that kind of led you into an area where you weren't familiar with, in IAs and being put on admin leave. Yeah.
I think naively, a lot of things start well-intended. Everything starts, I think 99.9% of us have a good heart and we mean, and our intentions are in the right place. But like a lot of things don't often end the way they start. And so I started taking steroids just to get some size. I'm the king of rationalizing, man. On the one hand, you're not allowed, you can't lose a fight. You're not allowed to lose. There's a misconception out there that somehow in a hand-to-hand life or death struggle or fight with a bad guy, that somewhere along the way, if you start to be on the losing end of that, somebody's going to blow a whistle, call timeout, separate you, and let you start over. Right. So, that fear of like, I'm not strong enough, I'm not fast enough, I need to have an edge. So that opens the door, man, to rationalize, well, if I can be stronger, faster, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. That's the rationalizing part of steroids. I would argue that, God, this is going to piss some people off. I would argue that I want not abusing, but I want our guys to be as strong as they can be, as healthy physically and mentally as they can be, because they're tasked with doing some superhuman things at times. I think there's actually a place for it, but it needs to be like a lot of things, monitored, regulated, implemented properly, so we don't do harm. That we actually,
No, I don't think you're off. So here's the thing, right? Why is it socially acceptable for professional athletes, elite athletes, to use performing enhancing drugs, to play a game, But then we talk about maybe perhaps performance enhancing drugs for people to be able to live a life and go home to their families. That's two separate things to me, yet we're judged on so many different levels, right, from these elite athletes. And I would argue that our officers need to be elite athletes because their life depends on it.
It's a different way of looking at the same situation. I think that if we treat the job what it is, it's everyday guys and girls going out there doing superhuman things, feats. There's never a situation that they can come up against where they lose, because if they lose, they die. It's not a point that gets scored. There are real consequences for failure. So the argument, without beating it into the ground, is you need to be as strong physically and mentally as you can be. If there's ways for you to maximize that safely, I'm all in. The problem, Neil, is John Kelly was not being safe. I was not being healthy. If 1 cc was good, 10 cc's was better. And unmonitored, not regulated, my free and total was up over 4,000. A normal healthy male's testosterone range is anywhere between like 400 and 700.
Well, I think you bring up a good point there, John, because one of the things that's facing a lot of officers is a low testosterone level, which is unhealthy. So if we haven't lost all our listeners yet because of the topic, there is a message here. One is that you should go get your testosterone checked because that is a health related issue. Many of us do suffer from low testosterone. So, there's the anecdote to this story, if you're still listening to us. And this is driving a point, but we're not here to talk about performance enhancing drugs. This is going to lead into why John's message is so impactful about how this affected his career and what the IA process in our traditional policing does. So talk a little bit about that, John, because I think that's where the true message is as we led into with that story.
We don't ask why. Anytime anyone gets in trouble, and I've spent a significant amount of time as a subject employee, right? The subject of an investigation, we don't ask why. So we're overly concerned about doling out punishment and insulating the agency from liability. At the end of the day, if we cared about our employees, we would ask why. What brought you to this place? Whether it's abusing steroids or drinking, the myriad of issues that we have in life that bring us to a place where the subject of an investigation, we just asked why. We could stop the cycle of us just this revolving door of unacceptable behavior. See, because ultimately my behavior was unacceptable. I crossed the line and I need to be held accountable. But there's a way to go about doing that. When we don't ask why, we go the punitive route right out of the gate, then everybody digs their heels in. There's no opportunity for growth or change or any kind of development. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I go down two different paths when I think about these things. One is that we didn't have great role models in this profession. We were told we were paramilitary structure. We had paramilitary leadership where we did what they told us to do because of rank and power. There wasn't a whole lot of people leading with love and leading with their heart, or people caring about us. So the current day leadership really didn't have great role models to go off of. So when someone went into IA, it was immediately, right? No one could talk to them, right? Let's be honest, that's a terrible message. It's not they can't talk to them. They can't talk to them about the subject in which they're under investigation. But what do? Somebody goes on IA, they're immediately guilty until proven innocent, right? Aren't cops, they're guilty until proven innocent. We send them off for, 8, 10 a year, do an investigation. No one talks to them. We isolate them. Then we find out that nothing happened to them. And then come back to our organization. I'm sure they're going to be happy. They're going to be so happy with the leadership, right? They're going to be a great asset to the organization. No, they're going to be pissed off. They're going to be angry, right?
Oh, listen, you hit on something that I just wrote about that I want to see incorporated, and it speaks to your point. I want to see peer support combined with internal affairs. Here, walk with me on this. I haven't vetted it out completely, so I'm sure there's still a few holes in it. I know, weird that would be a thing of mine. But if you get in trouble, right? You're on ice, you're in timeout, you get a peer support team member assigned to you, and you stay connected.
Absolutely.
And you get somebody checking in on you. And you got somebody that you can talk to about your feelings so you don't feel abandoned by the agency. So there is a connection still. Listen, you get in trouble, you're not allowed to go in the facilities. You're stripped of your credentials, your gun if they provided it for you. You're basically blacklisted, and nobody is told you'll get in trouble if you talk to him.
Right.
That's the mess. So then we wonder why, after a lengthy investigation, there's some serious damage done there to that individual that was exonerated or found not guilty. To your point, the best thing that happened to me right out of the gate was getting in trouble. And I'll tell you why. Because it dispelled the lie that we're family. See, because that's the other thing that we do to our people, man. In order for me to get Neil Gang to care more about this agency than he does his family, I need to tell him that we're his family. See, that's what we do, man. We're sneaky about it too, brother. We get you to believe that this thin blue line is your family. It's the only way we're going to get you to walk away from your kid's t-ball game and not be there for the special events in your family's life, because work's more important. Work's my family. See, but family's funny, man. Work is your family as long as you don't do anything wrong.
Right.
As long as you toe the line, and that's not family, man.
Well,
That's not family.
here's one. And to your point is that your family until you have an allegation that you did something wrong. I think you said if you do something wrong, how about just the allegation?
The allegation.
We'll excommunicate you. No one can talk to you. We'll isolate you. And we'll already make a determination before you even have a chance to give a statement as to what you did. That's what needs to change. Let's talk about family for a minute. Your family until you retire. Where's the family when you retire? That's why so many officers are dying by suicide when they leave. There's disconnected. The lie of one, that this is your family. Two, here's the other lie. You are a cop, right? We're not cops, right? Or you're not a sheriff, or you're not a firefighter. That's what you do for a living. That's what you do for a living. That's not your identity. You're so much more than that.
Right. And so, but we know that now because we have this thing called, hindsight and life experience. So I say the best thing that ever happened to me was getting in trouble early on, because I was like, this is the way family if this is the way I get treated as family, holy smokes, right? It wiped the lens that I was looking through this thing of ours through. It gave me some clarity. Family's family, man. I'll die for my family. There's nothing I won't do for my family. The same cannot be said for the work family that you are led to believe will be there for you, right, through thick and thin. So I think it's important, right out, because then we start hearing, Neil, about organizational betrayal and all these things, all these buzzwords that come up, and you go, listen, if they have your back, okay, great. If they don't be shocked. Let's dial it back in. get back to reality. This is a job you do. You can love it. You can be awesome at it. But it, like you said, not who you are. At the end of the day, those people that are waiting for you at home, this is the kicker, man. God, did I fail them on so many different levels. And thankfully, right? Thankfully, they stuck around. They stuck around and they allowed me to, they gave me some grace. They understood, I think, that at the end of the day, I was worth saving. You see, because this is the thing, man. This doesn't happen over a year, 2 years. I did 30 years. You just the same amount of time, Neil. Can you imagine being treated shoddily or not the priority for as long as, I'll speak for myself, as long as I did that to my family and still have a family to come home to? Like, that's a testament to their resilience, to their commitment. My wife redefined for me unconditional love. Unconditional love's easy to talk about when there's no damage, when there's no betrayal, right? So we start talking about having somebody still in the picture after the life that we've placed them in. There's a lot of things, and which is, I'm coming full circle on this, man. We are in this job, this thing of ours, and I think that we need to do a better job of realizing that everything that we do impacts somebody that loves us.
Absolutely. I think that we fail to understand, or maybe now we do, but we fail to understand the impacts of secondary trauma on our families. And that's something that's really important. I want to go back to that point you brought about IA and peer support. I don't think you're off, John. I think that is, when we talk about re-imaging policing, I mean, it's just a buzzword, but there are things we can do better and we should be doing better. That's one thing we can do, is do have somebody from peer support who is that direct connect to that employee who is on IA, because I think that is so important. There's a gentleman that I used to work with. His name is Mike Gregory. He was a canine officer. This guy used to be, the guy. And he had a great canine career. He ended up getting into a shooting. Somebody on US 60 coming from Vegas, going to Phoenix to get stopped. Mike stops him. Guy jumps out with a fake firearm, and Mike does what he's trained to do and ends up taking the life of this individual. Sad, but that's what we're trained to do. He did the right thing. But no command staff thought that. They're like, oh my goodness, we just shot an unarmed subject. And Mike slowly got put on IA, slowly got sent to fit for duty tests, and ended up having to leave due to PTSD and retirement. But Mike went through hell, and Mike and I stay in contact. And he drives me a lot of times because he taught me what it was like to be on IA. He goes, no one reached out to me. The isolation is what kills you. The thought of betrayal, that I am no longer part of the organization. Like you said, I can't use the gym. I don't have a badge anymore. I don't have a gun anymore. I am basically stripped of everything who I am. And now I'm sat on the sideline until they decide that they're going to bring me back so they can interview me, which could be months, right? Yeah. So I learned a lot from him. One of that is that these insecure leaders that immediately jump out and try and save their hide when their officer does something maybe questionable, we have to get rid of those insecure leaders, right? There's so many people that take this seat as a chief and the minute they take the seat, they're doing everything they can not to lose the seat. Instead of taking care of the number one priority, that's who their people are. Now we got to take care of our people. We have to recognize what we've done traditionally potentially needs improvement, and we have to make sure the mental health of our people are our number one priority. That's what hasn't been done. So your thought of somebody gets on IA, they get connected to somebody in peer support, John, I think it has validity, and I think something we should push forward.
And Neil, Stephanie Kiso, you know Stephanie?
I do.
I read her book, and she talks about like the conditions that can start that slide, right? That can put an individual in a position to take their own life, to kill themselves. Isolation, organizational betrayal, and a sense of burdensomeness, right? Well, that's what happens when you go through the internal affairs process. There's no support, and everybody's sitting back, everybody's scratching their head, prayer hands, emojis, and all this other bullshit, wondering, what could we have done? We could stop doing the things that set people up to kill themselves. We could do that, no?
Well, you brought up a point, and I want to go back to it, is we don't even ask why. Like, let's go back to that for a moment. There's something called a performance improvement plan, a PIP, they call it in certain circles. we'll put somebody on a pip for their performance before we even sit down and ask them why. Why is your performance dropping? Why is your cognitive maybe a little less than what it was? Why is your attitude or your morale suffering? We have supervisors that will put them on a pip and write them up before they even have a conversation with them to determine what's going on in their life. That is what needs to change.
Neil, and to take it one step further, you ask why if you care. So I had a guy on my motor squad, quick story, always high producer, always go-to guy, just the best. He's a no-show for an event that he was going to cover for me. I said, come on. I said, are you effing kidding me? Right? And I go, we need to talk. No, I get it covered. I sit him down and I go, why? Why? Because this is not like you. Why? Well, he's got an elderly parent with dementia. And I go, say no more. Been there, done that. I should not have tasked you with this, with everything else that you got going on in your personal life. So from a leadership standpoint, I learned a valuable lesson that day. I didn't know him enough. I needed to know him better. One of my guys, I didn't know that he was dealing with an elderly parent that had dementia. Now, anybody that's had that situation knows the toll that takes on the caregiver and the family, right? I should have known that. And I didn't. So what that did, that was a wake-up call. That was a bucket of cold water on me. It was because this is what we tell our leadership, Neil. It's none of your business. Their personal lives are their personal. No, bullshit. This is another dynamic that needs to change. You need to be intimately familiar with the lives of your people. You need to know who has kids and whose kids got a T-ball game on Fridays. Right? You need to know who is possibly going through a rough patch in their marriage. You need to know that so you can be a big brother or a big sister to them. You need to care, and the way you care is by asking why. The way you care is by getting involved. Be a nosy prick, right? Let somebody say that's none of your business. But I can remember, Neil, for the entirety of my career, I wish I had $1 for every supervisor above me that says that's their personal life. It's none of your business. Maybe the reason why we're so jacked up and sideways is because we've made it none of our business. Maybe the way we get back to caring and loving each other is to make it our business, man. I think this missing component is right there, man. It's right in front of us. We just got to do things differently.
Oh, I agree. When we say we have to change, we do have to change, but it has to be internal change, not these buzzwords and this political BS outside that we have to change.
Right.
It's going to be internal. Let me give you an example, John. What first-line supervisor classes that you have attended that are mandated talk about emotional intelligence, talk about your feelings, talks about what you should be doing, talk about the things about caring for your people, the things that you're talking about now. Where is that? What chapter is that in our first-line supervisor books? Is that
Doesn't
not
exist, brother.
Is that because we don't teach leadership, we teach supervision. We teach supervision, we don't teach leadership. I think that our profession is changing a little bit now, but over the last decades, we never saw that. We never saw that because it wasn't important. Let me just dive down a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Think about the time you took your first sergeant's test. What did they question you on? What was that? What were the scenarios, right?
And procedure bullshit.
Right, were you tactically sound and what's your policy and what's this? Where was there anything about, and I'll never use the word soft skills, but where is your human skills? Where was that tested? That's what we need to test. That's what we need to put in leadership. That's what needs to go up the ranks in this profession if we want to change the profession, right? Because I could teach you all the skills and I could teach you all the knowledge when it comes to books and policies. I can't teach you to care.
I half-heartedly have to give command somewhat of a pass in this regard. So my dad, old Irish guy, alcoholic, he has since passed. I got mad at him for never having meaningful conversations with me, okay? And I never, he died before we ever had this conversation. I blamed him for that. Neil, he didn't have the skills. Nobody ever told him or showed him how to have a meaningful conversation with this son because he didn't have those with his dad. And so our leadership, we want them to care. They're operating from a time where nobody ever showed them what it was like to be cared for. It's starting at that level now. Like, hey, this is what it looks like. And the hurdle is, having a leader or a person in a position of authority to have some humility to go, you know what? I don't have these skill sets. It doesn't matter why I don't have them, but I want to. I want to be better. I want to understand what role I can play as a leader that cares. See, in order for that to happen, they have to admit that they're not awesome.
And that's
And
typical for some of them.
I have found that the leader who goes, I need some help here. You know what happens, man? The troops rally, man. We rally around that leader and we go, we got you, boss. What do you need from us? And then now we've got a culture shift happening. Now we've got people being part of the solution, and it's going to take leaders exercising some humility. And one, most importantly, which is I think I've done a pretty decent job at, man, is being vulnerable. If you can combine those, great things can happen, man. Great things can happen. The empowering and that culture shift, it happens almost instantaneously if our people and our leaders can combine those two characteristics, know that they don't know, and be okay with not being perfect. We're still quite a ways away from that happening. It's happening, as you know, it can happen. It happens all the time. There are some great bosses out there running some great agencies, but there's still some folks hanging on to that old model that still perceives vulnerability as weakness. If I had $1 for every chief that I knew who was sideways in their personal life, was an absolute shit show, right? I'd be a millionaire. But they can't let anybody else know. So the message that they send to their guys is, you can't have problems either, and you can't talk about them. This ripple effect of everybody sideways, and the ship's going down. What's the saying on the Titanic? Sinking, and all we're doing, we're changing rooms. We're switching room numbers. We're all going down, and it's just frustrating because it doesn't have to be that way.
No, I think two of the things that you hit on, and they're so important, and they're attributes that you don't really see in leadership books very often. And it's about humility and vulnerability. Humility and vulnerability. Very rarely do you see that in a leadership conversation or a leadership presentation. Now we're starting to see that. I know that John Kelly presents and talks about that. I think that's so important. You know what? I know you want to give a pass to the command staff, and I get it, right? Because I talked a little bit about how they really have good role models, but there's something that you and I talk about, and it's something like, if not me, then who? So
Right.
Somebody has to take the step, right? There are people doing that now, but someone has to take a step. If not me, if I'm not going to change policing leadership, then who's going to do it? Usually if you can't come up with an answer, that has to be you, right? We're called to do that. The Lord calls us to do that. So that's what's really important. I know we're getting into this great leadership conversation. We're probably gonna have to definitely do episode number 2 with John Kelly, without a doubt. But I wanted to shift a little bit about, when we talk about humility and vulnerability, about your leadership wellness program and what you're doing when you go to these agencies and delivering these messages and the impacts that you're making. So talk a little bit about that, John. I want our audience to hear about it.
I appreciate that, Neil. Man, let me tell you, I suck at so many things, but there's one thing that I'm good at, man. You put me in a room, I will get you thinking about you, your life, and the role that you play in it differently within a matter of seconds, man. Like I said, can't balance a checkbook, man. Don't ask me to walk your dog because I'll probably lose them. If you want me to talk to a room full of men and women about culture and the role that they play in their own lives, see, because what we've done is we expect leaders to lead people without being leaders in their own lives. Can't do it. Cart before the horse, man. So it has to start with you. And so the program, your personal, which is your relationships at home, your professional, your culture, your relationships at work, your financial, right? Because that can be a great source of anxiety and frustration for us. That can also drive other behaviors that keep you from being the best that you need to be at home. Your physical and mental health. Unfortunately, I have a lot of material to use from personal experience. Some of the key messages are that of personal accountability. Listen, stop blaming. This is what we do, Neil. Oh, Neil gang, that guy, stop. It's not Neil's problem. It's your problem. It's your fault. When we do that, when we stop playing the victim, that everything that happens to me is because of somebody else, some amazing things happen, man. right? We start empowering ourselves. And when we start changing and shifting the lens that we look at life through, maybe the failure, maybe that's an opportunity. If you don't look at it that way, well, then you're not going to grow. You're just going to continue to fail and never see the positive in that situation. Personal accountability. Hey, you're the problem. Nobody wants to hear that. When I start my presentation, Neil, I say, hey, my name's John Kelly, and I'm bringing you a gift today. It's a mirror. And some of you are going to absolutely hate looking into it. I said, and that's okay, man, because we're going to walk together and we're going to figure some stuff out today. So you doing a no bullshit assessment of you is difficult.
Correct.
Because you're going to see some things that if you're honest with yourself, that you're not happy with. That's a blessing, man, because once we identify the problems, the beauty is if the problems rest in you, the solution rests in you. We are given the tools to be our own wellness advocate, that it's about you taking care of you. And when you can get to that place, your relationships at home and at work and your finances are in order, your physical and mental health are in check, you're unstoppable. Then you can be that big brother, big sister. You can be that beacon, that light, that hope, that shoulder, that person, that protect for everybody else that needs you to fill that role.
Amazing words. I want to ask you something, but I have to touch on something real quick because I think you went down this path. It's something that I've been really trying to impress upon our community, the law enforcement or first responder community. It's that there's narrative that it's okay not to be okay. I'm not saying that that's a bad narrative, but this is my narrative. It's okay to also be okay. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to go get mental health checks. It's okay to leave this profession walking out as opposed to limping out. Not everybody has to leave this profession scarred and damaged. I think that's what you're talking about.
Dude, it's the best job in the world. Whenever I go to a conference, and there's always somebody that they start off with trying to convince the room that they're all jacked up. Oh, the things you've seen. What have I seen? What, the ER nurse hasn't seen worse? Talk about somebody that holds dead bodies every day, right? We do this. We get involved in situations from time to time, and they're terrible. They're not daily, brother. You know this, and I know this, right? Listen, one of the easiest jobs in the world is being a cop. The only job that's easier is being a firefighter, okay? Let's stop with the bullshit. Right? We get to do some awesome, cool things with our friends for 30 years, man. When we take care of ourselves, when we find healthy ways to deal with the stress that happens from time to time, right? When we make our personal relationships with our spouses a priority, like when we love them the way we're supposed to, and we take time for our kids, we exercise and we eat right, we don't abuse drugs and alcohol to cope, we have amazing lives. We have absolutely amazing lives. But you know what? That doesn't fit the narrative for some folks out there because they're like the pharmaceutical industry. If they don't want to give you a cure, see, the cure is you taking care of you. The cure is you being real with yourself. The cure is you being your best own mental health wellness advocate. But when you do that, you remove their need to be in this equation. So there's a whole segment of this wellness space that is hoping that you stay stuck. I know that's kind of shitty to say, Neil, but I believe that.
Well, I think our last episode with Dr. Lee talked about that. Not everybody has PTSD. Sorry. I'm sorry to tell you, but us therapists, we have a way to code and how we can get funding, and it has to be PTSD. So now we tell you have PTSD and off you go and good luck, right? So again, I'm scarred, I'm broken. But again, we have to pass the message in. It's okay to be okay. It's the same message that you're delivering every day. I know we have a few minutes. I have to talk about this for a minute. The physical threat of harm when people talk about stigma, because I think I was watching a podcast or an episode where John actually threatened to punch people in the face. Talk about
Yeah. So if somebody says smash the stigma, I'm going to punch you in the mouth. Yeah, I threatened a room full of first responders. Yeah. It was one of my finer moments, Neil. Yeah. But I can tell you this. Nobody said smash the stigma in that room because they knew I was going to make good on my promise.
Well, they saw pictures of you from the 90s. They knew it was up.
Yeah, they're not worried about the broken old man standing in front of them right now. Hey, you know what? The whole thing, it's not about the stigma, man. It's about how you live your life. It's about how you live your life. So start living a better life.
Definitely. Amen, John. What's next for you? And then share some last thoughts on where people can find you.
You know what? I'd be remiss. Listen, started a foundation, Neil. It's for our people. Heroesguidingheroes.org. Now, listen, we talked about this. There are a lot of great organizations out there doing great things for our people after the crash, after they hit the wall. This organization, Heroes Guiding Heroes, takes a proactive approach to your wellness. An example, maybe you need some financial assistance to help. Maybe you're, God forbid, there's somebody, a family member getting treatments for something out of town and it's financially devastating to you. We're going to come in there and we're going to pick up your hotel room and we're going to help provide you some financial resources to get you through this tough time. Maybe you and the old lady, man, you're in a rough patch. There's a therapy, a marriage, a Christian counseling for marriage counseling, and it's in the next state over. You need $1,000 so you can go there for the weekend and get your relationship back on track. We'll pick up the tab. We don't want financial obstacles to your health and well-being. We want to get to you before the instance of there being some calamity or some terrible situation. So heroesguidingheroes.org is that foundation. Real simple. Go on the website. If you know somebody, you can go on there for them and get the ball rolling so we can get some services lined up for our first responders and their families. And I've got my thing, man. lawenforcementlifecoach.com, John Kelly. I love this time. The first 30 years, man, I'll say this for you. You thought you made a difference then? Watch out. Get out of my way, man. This second chapter is the legacy. It's how we leave this place better than we found it. We filtered through all the bullshit, man. We know what we need to do to get results. We need to love and care more for each other. And if we do that, right? If we do that, some amazing things are going to happen.
Amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, retired Sergeant John Kelly. What a blessing to have him today. John, I pray for you daily. You're a brother, and we'll have to have you back on because there's so many more things we need to talk about. I think as we leave, I think it's really important, again, take things in your own hand. It's okay to be okay. Go take care of yourself. You deserve it, and your families deserve it. So here's the thing. Join us on our 6 Pillar Podcast family by joining us and following us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're interested in a sponsorship, reach out to us. We have some sponsorships available. I'll say this. It's so important that people that are listening understand that they're appreciated, needed, and wanted, because so many leaders out there are not telling you that. We need you, we appreciate you, and we'll love on you. Remember that one person could change the world. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, John Kelly can change the world. So until next time, stay safe, healthy, and resilient. And most importantly, God bless.
We extend our gratitude to Chief Neil Gang and John Kelly for leading us through this exploration of wellness and leadership for our extraordinary first responders. This is Shalyn Finstead signing off on behalf of Techna Innovations and the 6th Pillar Podcast. Be safe, and thank you for joining us.